What if I told you that the most formidable enemy of the fierce northern warriors was not the sharp axe of the Saxon or the raging storm on the open sea? True death came to them quietly and unnoticed, seeping through cracks in the walls along with the icy breath of the polar night. The Vikings, who conquered the oceans, engaged in a desperate battle with the cold every year, where their incredible engineering ingenuity was their only protection from death. They turned their homes into complex thermal machines capable of sustaining life where even mercury froze. Watch the video to the end to find out how one inconspicuous detail in the roof design saved entire settlements from a painful death in their sleep. Are you ready to learn the architectural secret that allowed people to survive in hell? The first thing that catches the eye when looking at a Viking settlement is the strange, curved shape of their longhouses. The walls of these buildings were never perfectly straight. They curved outward, resembling the sides of a huge, overturned ship. This was not an aesthetic decision or a tribute to maritime traditions, but a strict engineering calculation. A straight wall takes the full brunt of the gale force wind, creating enormous pressure on the structure and blowing out the heat. A curved surface, on the other hand, causes air currents to flow smoothly around the house, significantly reducing heat loss and wind load. The wind in northern latitudes behaves like a living creature, trying to find any weakness in the defense of a dwelling. The Vikings understood aerodynamics on an intuitive level, passing on their knowledge from generation to generation. They built their houses strictly oriented to the wind rows to minimize frontal resistance. The ends of the building, the parts most vulnerable to the cold, always faced the direction from which the least fierce winds blew. This allowed them to keep precious heat inside, creating a zone of relative calm even in the most severe blizzard. The interior space of the Longhouse also obeyed the laws of energy conservation. There were no unnecessary partitions to obstruct the circulation of warm air from the central hearth. A single huge hall allowed the heat to reach the farthest corners, where people slept, unhindered. Every cubic meter of space was used wisely so as not to heat empty space. Low ceilings along the walls created cozy pockets of warm air where sleeping places were located. The orientation of the house on the terrain took into account not only the wind, but also the relief. Builders often deepened the floor of the dwelling below ground level, using the soil as a natural insulator. Unlike air, the earth maintains a relatively stable temperature even in winter. The deep foundation created a thermos effect, protecting the lower part of the house from freezing. This required a lot of labor during construction, but it paid off handsomely during the long winter months. Materials for the walls were selected with great care, depending on the resources available. In wooded areas, thick logs were used, tightly fitted together. The gaps between them were caulked with moss and wool, creating a windproof barrier. In treeless areas, such as Iceland, walls were built of stone and peat. The thickness of such walls could reach 2 meters, turning the house into a real fortress against the cold. We would love to hear your opinion. Do you think modern builders could create something equally effective without modern technology? Write about it in the comments and be sure to subscribe to the channel. What if I told you that the roof over a Viking's head was a living organism? The most recognizable element of a Scandinavian dwelling was a massive turf roof covered with thick grass. It was not just a design decision to blend in with the landscape, but a brilliant thermal insulation technology. Turf is a dense layer of soil intertwined with thousands of grass roots that acts as the perfect natural insulator. In winter, the frozen moisture in the soil and roots created a composite material that did not allow the cold to penetrate inside. The process of creating such a roof was hard work that required precision. Layers of turf were cut from soil of a certain quality, where the root system was the densest and strongest. They were laid on the wooden roof deck in several layers, with the grass facing down in the bottom layer. This created a dense cushion that eventually grew together into a monolith. The top layer was laid with the grass facing up, so that the vegetation would continue to live and strengthen the roof with its roots. A layer of birch bark was always laid between the wooden frame and the ground. Birch bark doesn't rot, does not allow water to pass through, and serves as an excellent waterproofing material. Hundreds of sheets of birch bark were laid overlapping, like tiles, protecting the wooden beams from the dampness of the ground. Without this layer, the roof would have rotted in a couple of seasons, collapsing on the heads of the inhabitants. Gathering birch bark was a seasonal activity in which the entire settlement participated. The thickness of such an earthen blanket could reach 1/2 meter and weigh several tons. This required a powerful supporting structure of pillars inside the house. But it was this mass that provided enormous thermal inertia. During the day, the roof accumulated the meager solar heat, and at night it slowly released it into the room. In addition, such a heavy roof never blew away, even during the most terrible Atlantic hurricanes. The grass on the roof continued to grow, creating its own microclimate. In summer, moisture evaporation from the grass cooled the house, and in winter, a layer of dry grass under the snow created an air cushion. The Vikings literally lived under a piece of meadow raised into the sky. Sometimes goats or sheep were even let onto the roofs to mow the lawn. It was an example of complete harmony with the environment. However, insulation from above would be pointless without the right heat source inside. In the next chapter, you will learn why the Vikings deliberately filled their homes with acrid smoke. How would you feel about living under a roof that weighs more than your car? Guess why the Vikings never built chimneys in the modern sense? It would seem that smoke is an enemy that needs to be eliminated. But for the Scandinavians, it was an unexpected ally. In the center of the Longhouse was a long, open hearth, called a langeld, which burned almost around the clock. The smoke rose from it but did not go straight up the chimney. Instead, it accumulated under the high ridge of the roof. Here, under the ceiling, a dense, hot cushion of smoke formed. This layer of smoke acted as an additional and very effective heat insulator, preventing warm air from coming into contact with the cold roof. It trapped the heat in the lower living area of the house, creating a comfortable temperature for people. If the smoke had escaped immediately, the precious heat would have flown away with it, leaving people to freeze. Of course, living in smoke was not easy and required special organization of space. The smoke hung at a certain level, usually above human height. As long as a person sat or lay on the benches, the air was relatively clean and breathable. But as soon as they stood up to their full height on the bench, their head was in a pungent cloud. The level of smoke was regulated by special openings in the roof, which could be opened and closed with a pole. The smoke served another critically important function, preserving the structure of the house itself. It impregnated the wooden beams and straw mats with soot and creosote. These substances are powerful antiseptics that prevent wood from rotting in humid climates. Without this constant smoked treatment, the frame of the house would have rotted away in a few years from dampness and condensation. In addition, smoke was an excellent means of pest control. In a warm and humid house, insect pests that gnaw on wood would inevitably appear. The constant presence of acrid smoke under the roof made this area unsuitable for wood-boring beetles. Thus, the fire not only provided heat, but also protected the dwelling itself from destruction from within. Such a heating system seems barbaric to us, but it was incredibly effective for its time. The Vikings sacrificed clean air for the sake of warmth and the preservation of their homes. Life in a smokehouse was the price they paid for survival. Don't forget to like this if you are struck by this harsh rationality. Want to know a secret that would seem wild to modern people? In a longhouse, not only people lived under one roof, but also livestock. One end of the house was traditionally set aside as a barn, where cows, goats, and sheep spent the winter. This was not a sign of poverty or uncleanliness, but a well-thought-out solution for mutual survival in extreme cold. Animals served as powerful biological heat generators. Large horned cattle release a huge amount of heat energy simply through digestion and metabolism. A dozen cows in a closed room could significantly raise the air temperature, acting as large living batteries. This heat rose and mixed with the heat from the hearth, warming the entire building. People and animals were separated only by a light wooden partition that did not impede air circulation. The smell of manure and animals was, of course, strong, but for the people of that era, it was the smell of prosperity and warmth. The absence of this smell in winter would mean that the barn was empty and the family was facing starvation. Besides, people quickly got used to the smell, but it was impossible to get used to the piercing cold. Living in close proximity to animals also had practical advantages in terms of care. During a severe blizzard, there was no need to go outside to feed the livestock or milk the cows. The entire farm was close at hand, warm and safe. This saved the strength and health of the owners, who did not have to expose themselves to the risk of frostbite unnecessarily. Wintering in the house also saved the animals themselves. Northern breeds of livestock were hardy, but months of frost in the open air would have killed them. The loss of livestock meant the loss of milk, meat, and wool, the main resources for life. Therefore, people shared their homes with their breadwinners, protecting them as carefully as their own children. Manure that accumulated in the barn was also put to good use. It was regularly removed, but even as it decomposed, it gave off additional heat. Dried manure was used as fuel in treeless areas, closing the energy consumption cycle. Nothing went to waste in this closed ecosystem of survival. But animal heat is an external factor. How do you keep your own body warm when you go outside? In the next chapter, you will learn why wool was more valuable to Vikings than gold. How do you feel about the idea of living in the same room as a cow for warmth? For Vikings, clothing was not just a way to cover their nakedness, but the first line of defense against the deadly cold. The main material that made life in the north possible was wool. Sheep provided a unique fiber that had properties unavailable even to many modern synthetic fabrics. The secret was lanolin, a natural wax that impregnates sheep's wool. Lanolin made woolen clothing water-repellent. Snow and rain rolled off the surface of coarse cloth without penetrating deep into the fibers. But even if the wool got wet, it continued to provide warmth. This physical property was critically important for sailors and fishermen, who were constantly exposed to damp conditions. A wet linen shirt would kill its owner within an hour, while a wet woolen tunic retained body heat. Clothing was always multi-layered. The bottom layer was a soft linen shirt that was comfortable against the skin. Over it was worn a woolen tunic, creating the main air layer. On top was thrown a thick woolen cloak, often lined with fur. The air trapped between the layers of fabric acted as the best insulator, retaining the heat emanating from the person. Women spent endless winter evenings at spinning wheels and looms. Fabric production was a laborious process. It took months from shearing the sheep to creating the finished cloth. The fabric, called vadmal, was so valuable that it was used as currency in Iceland. People measured their wealth not in silver, but in meters of good quality woolen fabric. Viking pants, wide at the top and tapered at the bottom, often had a complex cut. They were wrapped with special woolen bands around the shins to prevent snow from getting in and to keep the legs warm. Shoes were made of durable leather, impregnated with fat for water resistance, and stuffed with dry grass or wool for insulation. These were the prototypes of modern insoles and insulation. Fur also played a huge role. Bear, wolf, and seal skins were used to make winter clothing. Seal fur was especially valuable because of its waterproof and windproof properties. Hats were lined with fur to protect the ears and head, the main areas of heat loss. Ready for the shocking truth? Firewood in the Viking Age, especially in colonies such as Iceland and Greenland, was a luxury comparable to precious stones. Forests were cut down for shipbuilding and house construction faster than they could grow back. This led to the first real energy crisis in history. To keep from freezing, Northerners had to look for alternative fuel sources, and their ingenuity in this matter is striking. When the forest ran out, the Vikings turned their attention to what lay beneath their feet. Peat. Peat extraction was hard, dirty, but vitally necessary work. It was cut into briquettes from the bogs, dried all summer in the wind, and stacked into huge piles. Burning peat gave off an even, long-lasting heat, although it smoked heavily. Harvesting peat was a strategic task. If you didn't manage to dry it in the summer, you would die in the winter. In coastal areas, driftwood, wood washed up by the sea, was a lifesaver. Logs carried by currents from distant Siberia or America were considered a gift from the gods. Real wars and lawsuits were fought over the right to own a stretch of shore where the current brought wood. Every splinter of driftwood was put to use, and burning such wood was wasteful if it could be used to make something. Another source of fuel was dried manure. This sounds unpleasant to modern people, but for the Vikings, it was pure energy. Manure was collected in barns, molded, and dried. It burned hot and was a renewable resource. This method had been used for centuries in the treeless steppes and tundra, and the Vikings adopted it without disgust. Even animal bones were used. The fat remaining in the bones after eating burned well. Burnt fish and cattle bones were often found in kitchen hearths. It was a fuel of desperation, but it kept the fire going when all else was gone. The fat of marine animals, seals and whales, was used in lamps for lighting and small heating. Tinder made from tinder, fungi boiled in urine was used for kindling. This chemical process made the fungus incredibly flammable from any spark. Fire was guarded like the apple of one's eye. Allowing the hearth to go out at night was not just negligence, but a crime against the family. In the morning, it would take a tremendous amount of effort and fuel to heat up a frozen house. But when the fire in the hearth died out, it was time to use a heat source that required no fuel at all. In the next chapter, you will learn how social norms changed with the setting of the sun. Are you ready to find out how the toughest warriors in the world slept? Sleeping in the cold meant certain death, so the Vikings planned their sleeping arrangements down to the smallest detail. Wide wooden platforms or benches ran along the walls of the Longhouse. During the day, people sat and worked on them, and at night they turned into a communal bed for the entire household. They did not sleep on the floor, where cold drafts blew, but on a raised platform where warm air rose. In wealthy homes, there were lokrekias, closed sleeping cabinets or niches. These were essentially small rooms inside a large room, closed with doors or thick curtains. Inside such a cabinet, the volume of air was minimal, and the breath of 2 or 3 people quickly heated it to a comfortable temperature. This was the principle of a room within a room, creating an individual microclimate. The bedding was luxurious in terms of functionality. A thick layer of straw or hay was laid on boards, and animal skins were spread on top with the fur facing up. They also covered themselves with skins or heavy woolen blankets. The fur created an air layer under and above the body, insulating the person from the cold on all sides. Vikings often slept in their clothes, especially on the coldest nights. They only took off their outer, coarse clothing and shoes, remaining in woolen stockings and tunics. It was risky to undress completely in a house where the temperature could drop to 0 by morning. In addition, in case of alarm or fire, it was necessary to be ready to rush outside instantly. Sleeping together was the norm. People slept huddled close together, in a row or in a circle, to combine the warmth of their bodies. There was nothing shameful about this. It was pure survival physics. The heat of the human body, approximately 60-100 watts of energy, multiplied by 10 people, turned into a powerful heater. Children and the elderly were placed in the middle, where it was warmest. Woven wool curtains and tapestries hung on the walls behind the sleepers also served as insulation. They blocked the cold coming from the outer walls and created an additional barrier. The beauty of these tapestries was secondary to their function as thermal insulation. Pillows were stuffed with seabird down or soft wool. Goose and eider down were incredibly valuable for their ability to retain heat. Only very noble jarls could afford a down duvet. For everyone else, a rolled-up cloak or a sack of hay served as a pillow. A person's internal heat depends on fuel no less than a hearth. The Vikings intuitively understood that in order to survive in the cold, they needed to feed their internal fire with high-calorie food. Their winter diet was extremely rich in fats and proteins. This was not a diet for weight loss, but fuel for the body's metabolic furnace. The basis of the diet was meat, but not fresh meat, rather meat that had been prepared in advance. In the fall, during the bloody month, as October-November was called, they slaughtered excess livestock that could not be fed during the winter. The meat was smoked, salted, but most often dried or cured in the icy wind. Dried meat, skarpikjot, was stored for years and was a concentrated source of energy that could be eaten like crackers or boiled in soup. Fish, especially cod, was the second pillar of nutrition. Thousands of tons of it were dried without salt, simply hung on wooden frames. Frost and wind drew out the moisture, turning the fish into a hard stick full of protein. In winter, such fish was beaten with stones to soften it and eaten with butter. Fish oil was drunk and used as a sauce, saturating the body with vitamin D, which was so lacking in the polar night. Dairy products were prepared in the form of skyr, a thick fermented milk product similar to cottage cheese. Skyr was incredibly nutritious and could be stored in barrels with whey throughout the winter. Huge reserves of butter were also stored for future use. Butter was not eaten in thin layers, but in chunks, added to porridge and soups. Fat provided long-lasting energy to warm the body. Grain was scarce in the north, so bread was rarely baked and was saved for special occasions. More often, thick soups were cooked from barley or oats with the addition of meat, herbs, and whatever else could be found. Hot liquid food quickly warmed a person from the inside, stimulating blood circulation. A pot of soup standing on the fire was a symbol of satiety and life. Fermentation, pickling, was another way of preserving food. Everything was pickled, from vegetables to shark meat, the famous hakal. Strangely enough, the products of decay and fermentation helped to digest coarse food and supported the intestinal microflora. The smell of such food was terrible, but it gave life. In a world of eternal cold, the opportunity to experience extreme heat was not just a hygienic procedure, but a physiological necessity. Although the classic baths as we know them appeared later, the Vikings used their own methods of deep heating. The tradition of steam baths or primitive saunas existed as a way to cleanse the body and spirit, as well as a powerful means of preventing disease. Special small buildings or fenced-off corners were used to create steam. Stones were heated red-hot in a hearth and then doused with water. The explosion of hot steam instantly raised the temperature in the room to extreme levels. People sweated, getting rid of dirt and toxins that had accumulated under layers of woolen clothing over weeks. This heat shock trained the blood vessels. The sharp transition from cold to heat and back again hardened the body, making it resistant to temperature changes. Vikings often rubbed their bodies with snow after the steam room, closing their pores and invigorating their spirits. It was gymnastics for the cardiovascular system. The bathhouse was a place where children were born and the sick were treated. The sterility created by high temperatures and smoke made it the cleanest place in the settlement. Warming deep tissues helped treat joints that suffered from dampness and hard labor. Old people and warriors with aching wounds found relief here. Women used this time to take care of themselves. Combing their hair, washing with lye made from ashes, all this was only possible in the warmth. Hygiene was important to prevent skin diseases, which spread instantly in cramped and dirty conditions. A clean body retained heat better and itched less. It was also a place for socializing, but more intimate than the common room. Here, frank conversations were held, disputes were resolved, and plans were discussed. Nudity made everyone equal. In the bathhouse, there were no lords or slaves, only people seeking warmth.
If we combine our lands, our children will prosper.
But I worry about the harvest.
Surviving physically was only half the battle. Not going mad in a confined space when the sun doesn't rise for weeks is the real struggle. The Vikings were masters of psychological survival. For them, winter was not a time of stagnation, but of inner work, creativity, and strengthening social ties. The Longhouse became a cultural center. Long evenings were devoted to crafts. Men carved wood, repaired weapons, and wove nets. Women wove, sewed, and embroidered. Their hands were always busy. Monotonous work calmed the mind and gave a sense of purpose. Creating beautiful things with intricate patterns was a way to bring beauty and order to the chaos of winter darkness. The main entertainment was stories. Skalds and simply good storytellers were valued like gold. Sagas about gods, heroes, and distant travels transported listeners from smoky houses to the shining halls of Asgard. Oral creativity trained memory and united people with a common history and values. It was their movies and books. Board games such as Knifatful, Scandinavian chess, were incredibly popular. They trained strategic thinking and helped pass the time. The excitement of the game distracted from the howling wind outside the walls. Tournaments were held, passions ran high, and bets were made. Winter holidays, such as Yule, were the peak of social activity. Feasts, sacrifices, and gift exchanges broke up the monotony of winter into stages. The anticipation of the holiday gave hope and purpose. Abundant food and drink during these days served as an antidepressant for the entire community. Respect for personal space in cramped conditions was part of an unspoken code. People learned to ignore each other when necessary, allowing them to be alone with their thoughts, even in a crowd. Conflicts were nipped in the bud, knowing that there was nowhere to escape from the submarine. The history of the Vikings' struggle against the cold is a lesson in the incredible adaptability of humans. Without modern technology, electricity, or synthetic materials, they created a life support system that worked flawlessly for centuries. Their homes, clothing, diet, and social structure were all part of a single mechanism designed to conserve heat. They did not conquer nature, but studied it and integrated themselves into its laws. A crooked wall, a turf roof, a smoky hearth. Every decision was paid for with experience and mistakes. Today, looking at their legacy, we see not primitive barbarians, but ingenious survival engineers whose inventions saved thousands of lives. Which Viking technology did you find most surprising or unexpected? Was it the living roof or sleeping with sheep? Write your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new journeys into the past.